we're here today in West Springfield High School doing the West Side Legacy Stories. Just as an introduction, can you give me your name and where you were born?
Edward C. Peck, Jr. I was born in Springfield, August 31st, 1916.
Nice. So how long have you lived in West Springfield?
Since 1927, when I came to West Springfield from Springfield and entered the 5th grade at Mitnick School.
What caused the move?
We lived on Nelson Street in West Springfield, up by Kings Highway, a suburban town even then, very much so.
Yeah. So what caused you to move from Springfield to West Springfield?
The purchase of a house. My father bought a house on 38 Nelson Street on a 50 by 100 lot with no garage, and that's why we moved. He worked at the American Bosch Magneto and had been working in the post office, but he left the post office where he thought were greener pastures at American Bosch Magneto in the sales department.
In the sales department. So, have you lived in West Springfield ever since, or have you moved a bit, or not really?
This is my home base.
Nice.
I've lived, yes, whenever I bought a house, it was in West Springfield. After World War II.
Was there a reason
prior
for
to that, I always represented that I came from West Springfield.
What changes have you noticed in the town?
What changes have I noticed in the town? Well, there's nothing but change going on.
True.
In this country. It's a young country, and change is the order of the day. There's no such thing as immemorial practice. Things change almost overnight. Probably the greatest change, well, I don't know whether I could say there was any greatest change, but the change in the school department was quite noticeable to me, especially. Children who were handicapped, and at least severely handicapped, were not in school.
Yeah.
There were no teachers' aides. There were no assistant superintendents. There were no assistant principals. There was very little busing. You had to be 2 miles away from the town before you even thought about busing. Children walked to school without any crossing guards or any other paraphernalia that would be proposed to protect them. Apart from that, the biggest change, I think, was the discussion of sexuality. That seemed to be a huge change in this long period that I lived in the town and noticed affairs in the town.
Yeah, I think definitely the change with the school system is one that I find interesting, because I feel like I never would have thought about the fact that they didn't have someone for handicap, you know, special ed teachers and things like that. But I mean, I think that's definitely a good change.
Oh yes,
yeah.
I don't think. I have no doubt about what the changes were necessary or useful. Absolutely.
Yeah, I think that's very interesting to know, because I wouldn't have thought of that. What was it like growing up here?
We had children in our right there on 38 on Nelson Street. that stayed home. They just never went to school.
Yeah.
Very severely handicapped people. Now, I don't know whether they were homeschooled or not. I don't think they were, really.
Yeah. I think it would have been hard at the time, but the fact that they were able to make that progress it's very good. What was it like when you grew up here or when you first moved here?
When I moved here, it was just a suburban town, just as it is now. If you didn't pay your taxes, you lose your home. If you were lucky, you were able to have a car. Cars were not widespread, widely held. It was an event to have a car. And my father bought a car, first Model A Ford, that we ever owned, which was required for him to go back and forth to work. But everywhere I went when I worked, both when I worked in the summers and at the American Bosch and other places, I would take the bus.
Yeah.
Either walk to high school or walk to Whitney School.
How far did you have to walk?
Well, that'd be about a mile from Nelson Street to Whitney School. It was about 2 miles, 2.5 miles to.
Wow. So you did that every single day?
I beg your pardon?
Did you do that every single day? To like walk to school and walk back?
Well, yes. We'd even come back for noontime.
Wow.
We'd come back for noon and
Can't
go
imagine
back
that.
to the afternoon session.
Yeah. That's a long walk.
There was no lunch given in the elementary schools. You brought your lunch to a junior high.
Yeah.
And
Where
junior high, that was the change there, was you went from room to room rather than stayed in one classroom all the time.
How long of a break did you guys get for lunch?
A half an hour,
So the same,
that.
fairly the same.
yes. yes.
So they didn't have a cafeteria.
Well,
it was
yes,
more like
you talk about change, but actually, the basic character of the town has not changed. It's still a suburban town. It still depends to a certain extent on the overflow from Springfield and from people moving from Springfield,
Yeah.
both businesses and residential, into West Springfield.
yeah. What attracted you to West Side?
I didn't make that decision. I went where I was brought.
Yes,
And I was,
you are correct.
my father bought the house from a fellow who worked in the same place that American Bosch, Charlie Derrick. I remember why I remember his name, I don't know, owned the house. And it was a 6-room house with a small backyard and no garage. Luckily we rented a garage from a neighbor.
Did you have any siblings?
One daughter, one sister.
One sister.
One sister.
How was
not a
that? How
daughter.
are you guys close?
She
How
was
it?
older. She was 3 years older than I. Went to the Elms, wound up as a principal in the Springfield school system. And died as a result of an accident,
Sorry.
which really put me at the time on Easy Street. We settled the case for $500,000.
Oh.
That was not till '88. That was a long time after I had grown up in Westbury. But she went to the Elms College, which was very new at the time, just
Yeah.
started on, and I remember she was head of the yearbook one year, her senior year. I remember my father helping her do certain things, selling ads and various other things. But yeah, she was very influential in the family.
Yeah.
Very helpful.
Yeah. What was it like, going to school here, and then kind of more about your education, how that whole thing went?
Well, in elementary school, I can remember them holding up cards, and you would guess the amount of addition, subtraction, things like that. I can remember
Wow.
having them on Friday afternoons. One side of the classroom building was filled with old magazines, which we were invited to read and scan through. Apart from that,
Yeah.
I can remember once being tested to sing in a Christmas pageant, and they had me pass a few notes singing,
Singing.
and that was the end of my career as an entertainer. I was summarily rejected without without
Not much of a singer,
fanfare
no.
whatsoever. You're not going to be singing for us.
That's an interesting story. That's funny. What about your high school experience? How was that?
High school experience was I spent most of my high school days tending all of these sports that Garrett Clark had charge of. The football, that is, I was a so-called assistant manager, you might say, or equipment manager. I'd keep all the balls together and keep all the equipment together for both football, basketball, and baseball. The same people would participate in all of them.
Yeah.
And I probably spent more time with those than I did with algebra and other subjects.
Yeah.
I was good in history. I got the prize in history because I had always read a lot about the Revolutionary War, Civil War, and even the Spanish-American War and so on. World War I was very vivid to us because of the relatives that we had who were in it and were in combat and had been. So that's about the extent of what I did as far as high school. I learned by going to Springfield College for 1 year. Springfield, not the Springfield school system,
Springfield
had
schools.
what they called a junior college. It was the first junior college in this area. The state had no junior colleges that they operated.
What's a junior college?
Well, it was enabled. It really was the first year of college.
Huh.
And they gave people credit for the first year if you passed. If Dr. Hill, who was the principal of Classical High in Springfield, if he recommended you, you got into Smith, Mount Holyoke, and all the top-ranked colleges. They were very exacting and very good. I remember signing up for Latin, taking a year in junior college. This would be in about 1935, because I graduated from West Springfield High in 34.
34.
I went to junior college for a year. Then I went to Holy Cross.
That's
But
an
junior
interesting
college
concept.
put me on the right, what it meant to be a student.
Yeah.
You have to work.
Yeah.
You have to pay attention. You have to memorize. You have to study. You have to draw conclusions. You have to make it your own, one way or another.
Yeah. What high school did you go to again? I didn't get that.
I beg your pardon?
What high school did you go to?
West Springfield High. Oh yes, West Springfield High. I was still in. Well, I never lived anywhere else
Yeah.
except in West Springfield.
Yeah.
After,
I think that's the modern day cowing school, right?
I was one of the classes. The ninth grade. They had a ninth grade in the junior high, but they had one class that sent them to the high school. So I was in the high school for 4 years, both the ninth grade, 10th grade,
Yeah.
11th grade, 12th grade.
And then you went on to junior college and then
Yes.
Holy Cross.
Yes.
Why Holy Cross?
Why Holy Cross? I had an uncle who graduated from Holy Cross, and in fact, two uncles. One of them went there for only a year, then he went in the seminary. Then, lo and behold, he met a charming woman, and he decided to leave the priesthood and marry her. And he did, and he wound up teaching in first Culver Academy, then Lawrenceville School in New Jersey,
Nice.
and she taught in the Lawrenceville public schools.
Do you have any recollection of Mr. Cowing or Mr. Fozzie?
Oh, I have full recollection of William A. Cowan. In fact, after he retired from teaching, he ran for a moderator
Moderator.
in the town.
Yeah, town moderator.
Town moderator. And he would rely on me quite a bit because I was town council at the time.
Oh.
And he would rely on me quite a bit to help him deal with the problems that he might have as a moderator. He was always very appreciative of what I did for him, and he continued on. He was I thought he was an excellent administrator and an excellent educator, and he wound up as a good moderator.
Yeah.
His daughter was in my class at high school, Margaret Cowing. I remember her quite well. Yeah.
What about Mr. Fozzie?
Mr. Fawsey was the superintendent. He was a cut above everybody else. And all I know of him is that his office was in the town hall, I believe, next to the high school building.
Yeah.
It was the William A. Cowing School, that building. That's where we had spent 4 years.
Do you remember anything about Mr. Clark?
Jared Clark.
The athletic,
Oh,
I believe.
I knew him intimately, yes. He was from Springfield College. He was appointed coach of the football, baseball, and basketball teams, and taught social studies. He lived at Ludington Court, and I would even go there, and I was what you might call his student assistant,
Nice.
doing all the important things that
Yeah.
had to be, mostly with regard to the equipment.
Yeah.
We would sometimes we'd practice at the exposition grounds. Sometimes we'd practice behind the Kings Highway School on Kings Highway. We'd have to climb up a hill to go to the work there off of Field Street.
Yeah, and Clark Field is named after him, right?
Clark Field, he's the one that
Yes, he is the Clark.
Yes. People used to say, however, that the only failure he had in his life, as far as a coach was concerned, was he failed to recognize Angelo Bertelli as the star that he became at Notre Dame. He didn't consider him eligible for the West Springfield, so Bertelli went to Cathedral. Apart from that, he had good. He had the Pillsbury's were good players. He had a number of good players that he had developed. But like everything else, some your decisions are good, and sometimes your decisions go bad.
Yeah.
But you take the bitter with the better.
Yeah. What's your fondest memory of grade school or high school or college?
Fondest memory? I don't have fond memories.
I hear a spitball story. Something about a spitball story. Would you like to elaborate?
Oh, that was just in fifth grade. This Jordan.
So what happened?
We had a rash of throwing spitballs at one another. So she devised a punishment, spreading the entire surface of the floor of the classroom with spitballs, and making us, each student, on our hands and knees, clean
Cleaning the spitballs.
and then spread them again for the next one to do it. So that probably affected us. We probably didn't throw any more spitballs as a result of that.
That is an interesting story. Maybe let's get into Holy Cross. How was that for you? Just like
Holy Cross, I worked up most of the time through the Dean of Discipline. First, I worked in the dining hall. I remember being in charge of all the cups. We'd run around with a. There was about 500 would eat at a meal, 500 or 600 maybe. The whole class, the whole student body.
yeah.
So there'd be about maybe 1,000, 1,500 students there.
What was your major?
My major was English.
An English major.
Yeah.
And why did you choose English?
Well, I like to read. I like Shakespeare, and I like.
Yeah. I like to read a lot too.
Yeah.
So how come you ended up?
It wasn't to prepare for work at all,
Yeah.
and yet it helped me at Harvard. It did help me at Harvard, the fact
Yeah.
that I had.
So what kind of tilted you in that direction to pursue law after, kind of going for English?
At Harvard, when I graduated from Holy Cross, my final year there, I believe I had two aunts who suffered a very severe trauma as a result of a storm that wound up breaking a gas main and asphyxiating them. We settled that case, and it provided me, both myself and my sister, with funds to go to college, to go to law school. So I didn't have to work when I went to law school. I was able to go to law school.
Afford it.
At Harvard, wondering whether or not I had the right to be there. But I got through the course.
Did you enjoy it?
I endured it. I don't say I enjoyed it. You don't enjoy things that are hard. you do them because they're there. You have to do them. The same way with the service. When I went in, I didn't go in to enjoy it. I only went in myself because others were going in, and people, classmates of mine, were already dying. And I said, I'll do my part. That's why I went to service. Which was one reason. Another reason was I would have been drafted anyway.
Yeah, so you thought to just...
But I think I probably would have been better off if I'd waited. Practice law, the head of the draft board wanted me to wait. I said, no, I better go. My friends have gone, and I better go.
So you went
So
straight
I went
after
in
law school?
as a private. I went into Devon's as a private, stayed a private till I finally got some what you call rank, corporal and then sergeant, while I was overseas. But the government really didn't treat me very harshly at all. I thought I got a pretty good deal out of the service that I gave to the country during World War II. They even at one point sent me to Algiers to study court-martial procedures, because I was already a member of the bar at that point, and I had both passed the bar and been accepted. I graduated from Harvard Law School, passed the bar, and was sworn in as a member of the Massachusetts Judiciary. But still, I went in as a private because
Would you want to elaborate more on the patches? Because I wonder what they're for.
The patches?
On your jacket.
Well, it
and the badge.
Represents 3 years as sergeant, of course. It's the rank. Those hash marks on the side are the years you served.
Yep.
Wound up about 3.5. Yeah.
And then the badges?
Well, the good conduct, good heavens. Well, although a lot of them didn't have good conduct.
Yes.
They drank too much. They got involved with women too much. They went into houses of prostitution. They'd go out and get involved with local people. They'd start living with local women. But luckily I married. I almost say I put my wife on ice in order to keep her, so that when I did come back from the war, I'd have a purpose in life.
When did you get married?
1943.
43.
No, 42. No, it was 43. It was in 43, that's right. I was already in the service then. I'd been in the service since 42.
Yeah.
And I married in January of 43.
He just answered.
And then I went overseas almost 2 months after.
Yeah.
Went to war. First we stopped in Bermuda, a handsome, ordinarily vacation spot for most people. They let us off the ship, which was surprising because when they came back, half of them were drunk.
Wow.
But I stayed sober all the time because I had a wife to concern myself with and send my money back to her so she could, and she wound up breaking codes in Washington, D.C., or attempting to break them at a place called Arlington Hall. But then as far as service was concerned, we went from Bermuda to Oran, northern Africa. From there, they sent me from to Algiers, which was the headquarters of the North American Army Command. Eisenhower was there. They used the University of Algiers for their headquarters, and we operated in a court-martial office reviewing all of the records of court-martials
Yeah.
in the Air Force. As they'd say in the Air Force, shoot the blank, pay the bills, and make 3 copies of everything. and, and that's what we did. We made copies of everything. And of course, we didn't have the materials you have now for it. You had to type most of everything. But that was in line with my legal preparation. I was already a member of the Massachusetts Bar.
When did you take the bar?
In 42.
Before you went.
42 when I graduated, the same year I graduated from Harvard. I both passed the final exams at Harvard, had to write a thesis, and also passed the Mass Bar,
Yeah.
which was a full-day exam.
So during the time you were traveling, where did you go from after Algiers?
I went back to Sicily, where the outfit was ready to, and I thought we were going to go into Italy, but instead they transferred us from the places that we were at in Sicily near Mount Etna to Taranto, Italy, in the
Italy.
instep of the boot. Italy has the shape of a
Yes.
foot.
Yes.
And Toronto was there, our port. And from there we went to Egypt. The main city in Egypt there, Cairo.
Yeah.
Went to see the Sphinx. And from there shipped us to India
India.
via the Red Sea. We traveled on trucks and then got on boats, landed in Bombay, got on trains and traveled for 5 days. We traveled straight across India to Assam, which was in the far eastern part of India, near Burma, and wound up going up rivers into northern Assam, where there were airfields that serviced the Himalayas, which supplied Chongqing with presumably equipment and money to help. They spent thousands and thousands of dollars. I can remember all the way from Calcutta to the northern part of Assam, telephone lines and electric lines being strung almost without a bend. Everywhere you went, there was equipment piled high as you could see, so that we certainly won that war based on material that we produced. The country really went to work full time, all the time. Talk about Rosie the Riveter and everybody else, because they depended a lot on women at the time. Absolutely had to depend on them because the population was nowhere near what it is now.
Yeah. Kind of going off of your traveling and your experience in the military, what advice would you have for anyone now who's in high school or, young who wants to get into the military or travel?
I would say avoid bad habits. For God's sakes, don't start taking drugs. Don't drink. Deprive
good
yourself
advice.
in order to get a better time later on. You can't get everything at once. Things have to come to you sooner or later, but the later it is, the better, because it's far better to deny yourself partially in the hope of a better time.
Yep.
You may not get the better time, but generally speaking, a better time will come. And you should have faith in the fact that as far as Americans are concerned, opportunities are available to you that wouldn't be available to a lot of people in a lot of countries.
I agree with opportunity.
Yes.
So after India, where did you go?
Came back to this country, discharged in a place in South Carolina, came back to Springfield,
Yeah.
and decided at that time they had passed what they called a GI Bill. It provided a lot of benefits for veterans.
Yes.
They did it to relieve the unemployment problem that had occurred after World War I. Veterans coming back. And it worked. They sent them to college. Kids that never would have gone to college were sent to college at the government's expense.
I remember learning
And I
about
thought
the
I
GI
might
Bill.
go back to Harvard Law School and get a degree. So I talked to a counselor there at Harvard, and he said, "Look, you've got the ticket now, use it. Go out and open up an office." And so I just started an office with practically nothing.
Yeah.
But it worked out. Then I wound up joining with a very successful young attorney who, for some reason, did not serve in the service, Milton Donovan, who came to be one of the prime attorneys in Springfield.
Yeah.
Robinson and Donovan, and with him, I was able to live off of what the other members of the bar used to say was crumbs from the table.
Yeah.
things that other lawyers wouldn't bother with, you would take.
Very meticulous. Also, before we get more into your professional life, I think we're going to take a break and we'll be right back talking more about his professional life. Welcome back to West Side Stories. Here we have Edward Peck, and we're just going to kind of continue talking. I think maybe elaborate more on coming back from the war and what that was like, and then what did you do?
When
for a
you came
job.
back from the war, they gave you little benefits. The government, I think, he gave you $100. I think they gave you some transition pay.
Yeah.
So you had a little cash in your pocket. But I came back to family.
That must have been nice.
I stayed with my parents. No, that's right. No, we moved in. That's right. We moved in with the Mahoneys, which was my wife's family.
Yeah.
We moved in with them. That's true. For a year, we lived with them. Then they were driving around town, various places, and they saw this place in West Springfield, Thomas Drive. The house was for sale, $10,000. It had been built with money granted by the federal government because there was a restriction on materials there. Materials were still scarce.
Yeah.
And the materials to build the houses were given on condition that they sell them for a certain price. And that wound up. So with the GI Bill, which we got a mortgage for,
Yeah.
and about $500 down in cash, we bought the house and moved in there, Ruth and I.
So what did you do for work then?
Practice law. That's all my life. All I did ever after World War II was practice law.
So where did you work?
I always was with either Milton Donovan or in the same place where Milton Donovan had offices in the Court Square building in Springfield. I always practiced law in Springfield, not in West Springfield. I remember Ray Rosa wanted me to join with him in West Springfield, but I said, no, I think I'd rather stay in Springfield, which I did.
So how was it, like, you know, so what type of a lawyer were you?
I did a lot of real estate work,
Real estate.
both real estate. I started in doing tort work, but I didn't get the tort business that was necessary. I did mostly real estate, probate, and what you'd call office practice. There's things that could be done without having to go to court.
Was there a
But
specific
I was always
reason?
annoyed by the fact that there was so much delay in getting a court case settled or decided. You think, well, by the time you bring the action, you're looking at 2 or 3 years wait before you have a trial. And in the meantime, you'd have to either put up with the situation or
Yeah.
try to make some adjustment to it.
Did you always work with, you know, continue to work with people, or did you
I was
go
on my
off?
own. I was on my own a lot of it, really. You know, when I was with Milton Donovan, he would pay me for what I did for him, but I didn't have a regular salary. I only got paid when I did things for him. And so I'd have to scrounge to make sure that I got enough to feed the family and
Yeah. When did you start working for West Springfield?
it was about, let's see, what are we talking about now? I came back in 45, and it was in the 50s.
In the 50s.
Yes, sometime in the 50s. Yes, when I replaced Frank Raleigh as town council. Walter Cohen was the selectman at the time. Got the appointment for me, and I lived off that for 21 years, to a certain extent, always practicing, maintaining an office privately
Yeah.
and handling matters that wouldn't involve the town
Professional.
and didn't involve a conflict of interest. And just about getting by, you might say.
Yeah. What lessons has your work taught you?
My work taught me
Yes.
you only have to attention to detail. Everything is detail. Yes. little parts that you have to put together and make sure one little part can ruin you. So you have to spend a lot of time doing things that seem routine. But unless you make sure that they're done right, everything suddenly goes awry.
Yeah.
And when things go awry, things go from bad to worse. So you try to, and when you're taking a hit, take the hit and go from there.
Moving forward. That's a good life lesson. Also, how did you transition from being a lawyer to a judge? So,
I did that. I think the reason I was appointed a judge was, I think the principal reason, the only reason I can think of, was that I was chairman of the Regional Planning Commission. There was a new movement going on at the time throughout the country of the federal government encouraging planning, and rather than having everything totally political
yeah.
and haphazard, having things according to a plan in the way of spending federal money. And we had, Eisenhower had the interstate highway system
Yeah.
starting to go. And, and then they got during Nixon, I believe they developed a clear water system and improving the water situation up and down the river, everywhere.
Yeah.
And so that those things kept people busy.
So, who appointed you as a judge?
I was appointed with Michael Dukakis. I was chairman of that founding chairman of the Regional Planning Commission for 6 years. Then I was the treasurer for another 8 years. All during that time, we were able to persuade the member communities that paid, I think at that time they paid 8 cents per capita toward our operations. And we were able to get them to pay their assessment in advance, so we didn't have to borrow in anticipation of revenue. We had no liability whatsoever as far as bills were concerned, which of course isn't true now. All the governments borrow money in anticipation of revenue now. They wouldn't, but we didn't. And after I was appointed a judge,
That was by the
people
governor,
who took
right?
over the regional planning commission wound up borrowing money, and it's probably a good thing that they did. But they wound up not only borrowing money, but participating in some of the management and achievement of the works that were going on. I thought we should keep planning separate, totally separate from accomplishment, but they combined the two to a certain extent, which turned out to be, because now they have a budget, I think, of over $1 million, I believe, if not more. But
Would you tell me more about some of your time on the bench?
well, let's see. The first thing I did when I had what I call the reins of the court
The reins of the court.
the previous judge, John Graney, very accomplished, and he became Superior Court, then he became appointed to the Superior Court as a judge. The appeals court, he wound up on the Supreme Judicial Court. And the courthouse in Westfield is named after him now. But he had a practice of requiring people, tenants, to pay their rent into the court when there was some problem of maintaining the condition of the property.
Yeah,
Because there was
maintenance.
a lot of things that were wrong with many of the properties. And I did not approve of that practice. I felt it was money that was going to be stolen by people. And when you have money like that, as the Springfield Police Department
Yeah.
exhibited that with, most recently, with the money they collect for evidence in drug cases. It was stolen from them. And so I eliminated that process. That was one of the big things that I eliminated. We said, no, I'm going to make the landlord wait until after we've cleared up what's due in work. If you get the work done, we'll then give you a judgment, including the rents. And I think it worked out better that way. But we eliminated any accounting of any funds or any temptation of anyone to steal money from, because regardless of what you do, where money's available, people are going to steal it to sometimes. And
Yeah.
there's no reason, it's a disgrace if it does happen.
Yeah.
So that was one thing that I changed in the court system.
No, that's
Apart from
really
that,
good.
I think I was quite easy on fines. Rather than I said, get the work done. Never mind paying the fines. We don't want you to pay the fines. We want you to get the work done. And the sooner you get the work done, I'll give you a judgment as to what to do. And I wasn't afraid to, if there was nothing due in the way of work and nothing due in the way of improvement of the property that had been lacking, I would give them the judgment, and if it had to come to that, I said, you're going to be on the front page. People will be telling you, you'll be seeing that you evicted these poor people who wouldn't pay their rent.
Yeah.
Well, they wouldn't pay their rent because they either didn't have it or well, mostly because they didn't have it.
Yeah.
But that was not my problem. My problem was to see that their property was well maintained. Once it was well maintained, they had to pay the rent if they wanted to stay there.
Yeah.
And luckily, I didn't avoid that problem. It didn't. The press seemed to recognize that fact,
Yeah.
that you were trying to improve the property. And for a while, there was a lot of money available for improvements of properties during the time I was on the bench.
Would you tell me a little bit more about your family and how it was to kind of like settle down, your spouse? How'd you guys meet?
I beg your pardon?
How did you meet your wife?
Oh, I met her at junior college. in Springfield in
So right after high school.
1935. She was from Classical High, graduated, and I remember there was a professor called R.R. Smith who taught math. In fact, he wrote the book that we used
Nice.
in math. And she sat, he'd call her Ruthie. And he'd take her around with him. When he'd have to go around, he was head of the department, the math department. He'd go around to different schools that had math teachers, and I was surprised that he would take her, but he did take her. And nothing ever untoward happened, as far as I could see. And so when we finally did get married, we went to Father Connors, I think it was. He was the pastor of the Holy Name Church in Springfield, which was a church in Forest Park.
Yeah.
And he said, "How long have you known Edward?" He said. She said, 7 years. He said,
Wow.
It took him long enough to make up his mind, didn't it? Well, it was because I wanted to get an education.
That
That is
a good choice.
Learn to
Very
walk
good
before I
choice.
could run,
Yeah.
which is the best advice I can give people. So that's the reason. There's no other woman I was involved with or interested in, but Ruth Mahoney Peck. And we married in 43 there.
How many kids did you guys have?
Six kids and two miscarriages, but don't count
sorry.
anymore. But yes, 6 children.
What are some family stories you have?
Oh Lord,
Some classic ones.
oh Lord. One, yes. This is not. I had an office for a while in Huntington, Massachusetts. And occasionally, because Ruth was interested not only in taking care of the family, but also trying to get some kind of a career for herself, so that I had to do my part as well, that I had to babysit for the young daughter, Deborah.
Nice.
And I took her one Saturday to the office in Huntington.
Yes.
The office was right next to the barber shop there. And I had to go to visit a client's house. And I talked the barber into watching my daughter, my young daughter, who was only 4 or 5, I think, while I went to visit the client.
Yeah.
Which is something probably people would be horrified today.
Kind of. I
So
mean,
he,
4 years
to
old.
entertain her, he put her in the chair and gave her a boy's haircut.
Oh my God.
And that hit the front page. That hit the front page of the paper. So that was one family.
That's really funny.
I lived that down, but I don't know how I did it.
Yeah.
There was plenty of other things that happened too. I remember my wife would once in a while she'd come and say, well, I just bought this. I spent $700. Where am I going to get $700 to pay for that? You know, but somehow or other I managed to do
Any
it.
other family stories that are evident?
There's plenty of other family stories, but I'd rather not tell them.
That's perfectly fine. So, who was the most important person in your life?
The most important person in my life? Ah, dear, I think my wife, absolutely.
That's very sweet.
Yes.
And how come?
Well, she inspired me to behave. You know, she had no guile, no trickery, or but whatever she did very well. And in fact, she'd be, say, at one time when she was chairman of the Library Commission, I remember one daughter commented, they'll listen to you, I was town council talking to the town meeting, said, but they won't listen to Ruth. They should listen to Ruth more. She makes more sense than you make. So that I would say she was the most important thing in my life. Even though I admired my father and recognized the fact that he did everything he possibly could, not only for his own family, but for his siblings, my aunts,
Yeah.
and mostly my two aunts who had husbands who had come back from World War One, and unfortunately started drinking, which was a problem,
Yeah.
always a problem. One of them separated from them,
Yeah.
one of them stayed with them and endured it.
What are some of the happiest moments in your life?
Happiest moments in my life, I don't know if I have happy moments. I don't think people are happy. I think people are contented. I don't think they're happy. I don't think
Why is that?
there's a great deal to be happy about. I think you're always on the verge of being wiped out, and you're lucky to get by. It seems to me that
What's the difference
happy-
between happy and content?
much different, yes, much different. Happy is joy, yes. I think probably when I was named to the court and approved for the court, I thought that was as happy as I could get, in a sense that I was achieving what I considered a high point in the profession of law, and that I could then do to the public what I consider to be the best thing for them, following the law and paying attention to the work and doing it without neglect or without fear or favor. from
Is there
anyone.
anything you want to talk about that we didn't get to?
Well, there's so much that went on in those years.
What about your gold cane?
Well,
It looks pretty
I
cool.
grew into it. That's what I consider. I just grew into it. It was not an honor I thought. It isn't, I don't know if it's an honor. To a certain extent, I suppose, keeping your head down and avoiding trouble and keeping yourself well is sort of an achievement.
Yeah. How did you get it? The cane.
The Council on Aging in West Springfield gave it to me
Nice.
based on two criterions. One criterion was age. The other criterion was length of time living in West Springfield.
Nice.
And I had about 90 years living in West
Wow.
Springfield at the time they gave it to me. 102, 101. I never expected to live. I never expected to outlive my wife. I thought everything that we did in the planning of our finances was to protect her after I had died. And it didn't work out that way. She decided at one point to stop taking supplemental feeding that they could give you when she was in a nursing home.
I'm sorry.
She apparently got tired of the whole mishmash of getting through life.
Yeah, that's right. What are some of the most important lessons you've learned in life?
Behave yourself. It's later
That is a
than
good
you
one.
think. You never know when something's going to happen that you may have to account for it. I assume, of course, a lot of people don't believe there'll be any accounting in life, or they act as if there would never be any accounting.
Consequences.
But there probably will be an accounting.
Yep.
And somehow or other, that accounting, unfortunately, will be mean that you either make it or you don't make it.
Yeah.
And if you don't make it, I don't think it'll be a very, very unpleasant situation.
What are some of the proudest moments in your life?
One of the
Proudest. Some of the
private,
proudest. Some of the proudest moments in your life.
proudest,
Yes.
proudest moment. Huh. I don't know. I don't think I had proud moments.
Maybe just a moment, something like when you became a judge or a father, something that meant, it made you proud.
Well, I was glad to be appointed a judge, but I said, no, I get a chance to serve my country very well.
Yeah.
The proudest moment might have been when I passed the bar.
That is a good moment.
That might have
I'm
been
sure
when
that-
I passed the bar. Yes, I think that probably was as proud a moment as I'd get. I didn't have a lot of pride. I just thought, well, I'll do what has to be done. Why life is so complicated to people is really beyond me. Life is very simple if you don't take yourself so seriously. But if you take yourself seriously, you're going to suffer and suffer and suffer.
Well, good thing that you didn't take yourself so seriously.
No, you can't take yourself too seriously. Heaven's sake, you're only one of millions and millions, and you're lucky to get a chance to do something for your country and for your health, and try to be what I call an honest man.
That is great. Are there any moments that you could talk about from, history that, say, the Great Depression or Pearl Harbor? Do you remember?
I was very encouraged by Gorbachev when he recognized that the communist system just didn't seem to work for Russia.
Yeah.
And that was the greatest example of communism other than China at the time. And that gave me hope that the communist system would not prevail eventually throughout the Western world.
Yeah.
I think I took more heart in that than in almost anything that happens.
Interesting. Okay. Thank you for taking the time to be interviewed. I think this was really great and informative. I don't know if is there anything else you want to add before we close?
Well, the thing that bothers me about our system is that the entire economic system that we have is based solely on confidence. If you don't have confidence in the government, everything will fall apart because there's nothing to back it. Once you've used up all of the resources of the United States, which is the most trusted economy in the whole world, really, perhaps Canada and Australia and England.
Do you think the United
not
States?
not France or Germany isn't bad,
Yeah.
but that's because they don't have a military budget. But the the confidence that bolsters us is based on the fact that we don't owe as much as we should. But I think we're getting to the point where we owe too much.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm wrong. I think we owe too much, and I think at some point we've got to face the music and say we can't go on this way.
Yeah. Do you think the
Incurring
government?
debt.
Do you think the government does a good job in kind of keeping that
The
confidence
government
of the
does
people?
more than enough. The government tries mightily to do right by people. It really does. It fails many times, but it certainly, its motives are high, and I'm proud of the government. But I think they should at some point start to really whittle away somehow on that debt. I think it's who knows whether or not it'll ever get to one. I suppose
Yeah. Yeah.
it. I don't know how. I don't know. There's no other country that's anywhere near as stable as our country, I think.
It was great to kind of get your perspective and your point of view. I think we'll just kind of close up. It was really nice to talk to you. And yeah, I think.
It's funny that a person would grow so old.
Thank you for being here.
And they used to say people would become conservative as they get older. But I still believe in liberal causes. But I think
it's about the right causes.
We do have to whittle away at the deficits.
Yeah. Thank you for your time, for your service, and it was really great to talk to you.
Well, thank you.
Yep.